In this lesson, we'll use a revolve to build the hubless sprocket. So we need to build the sprocket down here. So basically this round shape here, and we're going to make it a little bit simpler, make it kind of a hubless type of a sprocket, kind of like what we have with the wheel. So we'll rotate around this outer ring here, but we want to make this piece right in here. So one of the ways that we can do this is to revolve. So we looked at extruding geometry along a curve with a NURBS shape. We looked at lofting geometry together, different curves together. This is going to use curves as well, and it's going to actually rotate them around an axis and create geometry that way. So the first thing we'll do is create our curve, and so I'm just going to create a NURBS primitive square. Let's kind of pull it off of the axis here. And let's think about this axis, this x-axis, as the middle of our object, and so it's going to be revolving around this. So pull it off to the kind of the outer part of where we want that to be. Make this a bit wider. Now whenever you create a NURBS square, it's actually made of several curves. So you can see if I click just this curve, you can see I'm not selecting the whole thing. It's actually in a group there. We've got all the curves underneath. So what I'm going to do is to go ahead and delete this curve, and then we can actually attach these curves together. So we'll go to Edit Curves, let's go into Attach Curves, and I just want to connect them, and we'll keep the multiple knots that are going to be created here. So we'll attach that. Okay. And then let's go ahead, delete our history. We can delete those single curves, and then we'll take this one, select the last one, and attach that. We'll delete our history and then delete that single curve. So now we're just left with a single curve here. Now I want to modify this a little bit, so I'm going to grab these points and just pull those in a bit. You can see we have an extra curve over there. We'll delete that. Let's grab these points, move those in, and pull those in just a little bit as well. Alright, and let's maybe pull this out a bit. Okay, so now what we want to do is actually revolve this. So we'll take our curve, go to Surfaces, under the Surfaces menu set, go to Revolve. Let's open the options. We're going to figure out the axis that we want to revolve around. So this is the axis, this is X, so we'll choose X for our axis preset. Okay. Now for the pivot, I don't want to pivot around this object because this will pivot just right around here. You can see if we do that, that's what's going to happen. So we want to actually choose a preset pivot, and our pivot point is 0, 0, 0, which is right here. We want to go all the way around, so that's 0 to 360 degrees. The NURBS surface that we create will be cubic. If we create a NURBS surface, we'll actually choose, I think, to create a polygon. Let me go ahead and just reset these so we can make sure that yours are the same as mine. Make sure we choose X, a preset pivot, okay, 0 to 360 degrees. And let's go ahead and actually make that a polygon. And let's choose control points for the tessellation method. And let's increase this number of segments. I want to get something very smooth. So let's do maybe 32. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so that gives us something like this. So you can see how it's taken that curve, revolved it around that axis, and left geometry behind. Okay. Now it's fairly smooth, and the reason for that is I want to use a different method for getting that edge smoothness versus adding edges and then doing a smooth on that. Okay, so let's go ahead and delete our history. Now you can see that this is all very smooth. Let's actually go into our normals, and if we harden everything, you can see it makes everything really faceted. But we can actually set a smoothing angle. So if we set a normal angle of, let's say, 30 degrees, then you can see everything that is within that tolerance is smoothed, but then we have a sharp edge that's not. And so that gives us more of what we are looking for. Okay, now to actually add a bevel to this edge, let's select the edge. All right, and the reason we want to bevel this is we want to get an edge that it's hard, but it's more real world hard, which in this case is not something that is completely sharp. CG tends to be really, really sharp, sharper than something would be in real life. So even something that's really sharp is going to have just a little bit of a highlight on it in most cases where we can see that edge. And so we can add that by using bevel. So we'll go into Edit Mesh, Bevel, and let's just go ahead and activate that bevel. You can see it's knocked that off, but the bevel that's created is really wide. So we'll go ahead and activate or select the Poly Bevel node here, and we'll change the offset. So you can see as I dial that offset down, it gets thinner and thinner. So it's basically replaced that edge loop with a loop of faces. So we can make that really thin there. Okay. And so you can see now that edge is still hard, but we now have, instead of a really sharp edge, we have kind of a highlight there. Okay. We can also come in and add, in our Poly Bevel, we can add segments to it. If we want to make it round, instead of just a cut off there, we can make that a little bit more round. All right, versus this side over here. Okay. So it's can be subtle, but it really helps sell what you're doing. You can still smooth it if you want to. Okay, if you want to get the smoothness there, but that bevel will help sell that if you've got something that's a little bit more high res. Now we want to create the sort of interior of this. I want to flatten this off, and so I'm going to select this, and we can actually extrude edges. So rather than extruding out faces, we'll go ahead and just hit extrude. Let's go to world, and let's just scale this in. All right, so we get something like that, and that's flattened out because I've just scaled it in. Let's extrude one more time, change our pivot, and push this in a bit. Okay, so we get sort of an interior there. And if you want to bevel this edge, one of these edges, you can do that as well. All right, so the next thing that we want to do, now that we've got our outer portion done, let's go ahead and finish out the sprocket with the interior. And so we'll go ahead and do that next.